Paris, early 20th century. In scientific circles, the name Marie Curie was spoken with admiration, but out on the streets, people shouted, "Polish homewrecker, get out of France, she destroys families." The tabloids exploded with accusations. Papers like L'Action Française and L'Oeuvre published daily attacks, branding her as a moral threat to the French nation and demanding her expulsion. By that time, Marie was already a widow. Her husband, Pierre Curie, had tragically died after being struck by a horse-drawn carriage when he became lost in thought and didn't step aside in time. The loss devastated her, but it also marked a turning point. Instead of falling into grief, she carried on their scientific work and climbed steadily to the heights of academic excellence. Years later, a new figure entered her life, Paul Langevin, a brilliant young physicist and Pierre's former student, trapped in a bitter and humiliating marriage. He was 5 years younger than Marie and lived under the control of his wife Jeanne and her domineering mother, who not only ran the family business but, according to Paul, often insulted and even beat him. Paul found solace in Marie, not just as a colleague, but as someone who truly understood and supported him. And eventually, they began a secret romantic relationship. They met in a rented apartment far from public eyes, but everything unraveled when Jean found a small note in Paul's coat pocket, a letter from Marie. Though the content was mostly scientific, the tone was far too warm, too intimate, and it immediately raised her suspicions. Jean exploded in fury, threw Paul out of the house, and threatened to go public with the affair unless he ended things with Marie for good. When Paul didn't show up to the lab, Marie sent their mutual friend Jean Perrin to check on him. And that's when she learned the truth. The secret was out, and Jean was ready to go to the press. Perrin acted as a mediator between the sides, Marie on one end, and on the other, Jeanne, her influential mother, and Paul's brother-in-law, Henri Bourgeois, editor of Le Petit Journal. They reached a fragile agreement. Paul would cut off all contact with Marie, and Jean would keep the story out of the headlines. But behind this uneasy truce, the real drama continued. Marie kept writing to Paul, urging him to leave his marriage and resist his wife's emotional manipulations. In one letter, she wrote, "Those are crocodile tears. She must understand that she no longer has any right to you." And in another, she laid out psychological strategies to break Jean's spirit so she would initiate the separation herself. Under Marie's pressure, Paul finally left home and moved in with Perrin, but Jean fought back. She hired a private detective to track him down and soon discovered the address of the apartment where he met Marie. When she entered the apartment, she found traces of Marie's presence, personal items, and most importantly, a bundle of letters that served as undeniable proof of the affair. Jean didn't act right away. She waited for the perfect moment, and it came in November 1911, during the Solvay Conference in Brussels, where the greatest scientific minds had gathered: Einstein, Planck, Perrin, Langevin, and Marie Curie, the only woman among them. That's when Le Petit Journal dropped the bombshell article, "The Love Story of Madame Curie and Professor Langevin," revealing their affair in vivid detail. Letters found in the apartment were published, and Marie was accused of seducing a married man, destroying a family, and acting immorally, just as she was about to receive her second Nobel Prize. Public outrage erupted, with demonstrations on the streets and a storm of vicious headlines. One newspaper even insinuated that Pierre Curie had taken his own life out of despair over his wife's betrayal. The Swedish Academy grew concerned. Its secretary wrote to Marie, politely asking her not to attend the Nobel ceremony to avoid tarnishing the reputation of science. Marie's reply was brief but firm. "Scientific work has nothing to do with personal life. I will come." And she did. She went to Stockholm, received her prize with dignity, and was honored by a banquet held by a women's scientific society. Meanwhile, in Paris, Paul finally secured a divorce. The court ordered him to pay alimony and granted him visitation rights with his children, and it seemed like nothing stood in the way of him being with Marie. But despite everything, he never proposed. In time, he went back to Jean and later found a younger lover with whom he had a child. Marie was left alone. And almost overnight, the same press that had vilified her changed its tone, now calling her a heroine, the pride of France, and the embodiment of national genius. Marie Curie was born in Warsaw in 1867, into a modest family that valued education above all. She worked as a governess for years to save money for her studies and at 24 moved to Paris to attend the Sorbonne. There she met Pierre Curie, her scientific partner and the love of her life. Together they discovered polonium and radium and were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1903. In 1911, now alone, she received a second Nobel, this time in chemistry, for isolating pure radium and studying its properties. During World War I, she organized mobile X-ray units that saved thousands of soldiers' lives on the battlefield, often exposing herself to high levels of radiation. That exposure slowly destroyed her health. She died in 1934 from aplastic anemia, a direct result of her lifelong dedication to radioactive research. She became the first woman to be buried in the Pantheon in Paris for her own merits. Later, Pierre was reburied beside her, and years after, Paul Langevin joined them. Those who couldn't be together in life now rest under the same roof.